Hello, and welcome to today's ICMI webinar. We're glad you've joined us for Just-in-Time Knowledge, how self-service can empower customers and contact centers. I'm Megan Selva, Director of Content and Training at ICMI, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping announcements. First, if you have any technical difficulties during today's session, simply hit F5 to refresh your webinar console. If you need assistance solving common issues, please click on the yellow help icon below the slides. Next, we encourage you to ask questions at any time during our presentation. We will answer as many questions as possible during the Q&A session that will follow the main presentation, but please feel free to send in your questions at any time. To do so, simply type your questions into the Q&A window on the side of your screen and hit the Submit button. Finally, today's presentation will be available on demand shortly after the completion of the live event. You'll receive an email reminder once it becomes available, and you can also download the slides in the resources list. Finally, thank you to IntelliPeer for sponsoring today's event. And with that, I'm excited to introduce today's speakers. John Goodman co-founded Technical Assistance Research Programs in 1971. Since then, he's managed more than 600 separate customer service studies, including TARP's White House-sponsored evaluation of complaint handling practices in government and business, studies of word of mouth and the bottom line impact of consumer education sponsored by Coca-Cola USA, and Business Week credits him with instigating the creation of the GE Answer Center and the use of toll-free telephone and web self-service systems by hundreds of major corporations. In addition, John's developed frameworks for building and assessing voice of the customer processes in B2B and B2C environments. He's taught service quality and service reengineering courses in Wharton Business School's executive education program, and he's the author of Strategic Customer Service, published by the American Management Association. Matt Chin is the VP of the Help Network and Social Media Response Team in the AARP Consumer Care Organization, focusing on growing AARP's self-service channel adoption within its contact centers, as well as ensuring valued interactions and answers are provided across AARP's social channels. He's previously held digital and community channel strategy and leadership positions at Yahoo, Sage, Symantec, and Oracle. Mac Green is the VP of Custom Engineering at IntelliPeer, where he oversees large and complex implementations, ensuring the completion of successful projects that deliver true value to IntelliPeer's enterprise customers. Mac is a telecommunications industry veteran, serving as a subject matter expert for internal teams, partners, and customers. In his free time, Mac is a youth-based basketball coach and has a newfound passion for cooking and exploring different recipes and ingredients. And with that, take it away, John.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. What we're going to be covering today is first the recent trends in customer experience, and COVID certainly has had a major impact on that, but we're also going to go back and understand some basic customer behavior and also report on a new study that we've just completed at CCMC on customer delight, and it's the first study of that type, and it's quite exciting. Secondly, we're going to talk about what is self-service and what is it not. Push the wrong button, sorry. And then we're going to talk about planning and implementing self-service. And a key part of that is evaluating the workload and channels, educating and empowering customers. And then I'm going to make an argument that in addition to focusing on self-service, you also need to focus at the other end of the spectrum on the complex issues and how can you delight. And that's another thing that AARP has done a very good job of. Then Matt is going to present the case study, and then we're going to talk about getting started to really achieve your goal in self-service. Now, in terms of relevant customer behaviors, one of the biggest things that we have seen is that customers don't read contracts or directions. So customers are quasi-clueless. One of my standard approaches is to ask an audience of 100 or more, how many of you have read your homeowner's policy cover to cover before you have a claim? And I normally get 2 hands. So the other 98 really don't know what they bought. Likewise, in business-to-business environments, 30% of CEOs say that their customers don't read the contract, even though they're paying tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars per month. The next behavior is that we find most organizations assume if you have a dissatisfied customer, it's because some customer service rep did something. In fact, we find 30% of dissatisfaction is caused by customers making mistakes or failing to read. And point here is this is preventable problems and contacts if you have an effective onboarding process, and I'll come back to that. We also find that most of the rest of dissatisfaction and unnecessary contacts comes from confusing marketing and contracts. If you have fine print and footnotes, you are creating questions and dissatisfaction. Now, the next finding is that 90% of customers first go to the website to self-service before calling. So a key question I would ask is your home page totally devoted to marketing, or do you also address top service needs and access to service on the home page and on the contact us page? We find a lot of organizations are not really inviting customer service contacts on the home page, and therefore they're getting telephone calls. Also, customers don't complain, but they spread negative word of mouth. And this is changing significantly. In the past, when customers did complain, they would go to the company. In the 2020 National Rage Study, we have now found that customers are complaining more than in the 2017 study, especially on social and on review sites, but they are not complaining to the company. So they are no longer complaining just directly to the company. They are going social, and you're not necessarily even being given an opportunity to deal with the issue. And then when customers are delighted, they spread a lot of positive word of mouth, and we have now found that that word of mouth from a delighted customer has greater impact than from just satisfied customers. And I'm going to share one excerpt from the Delight study. And the neat thing here is that people actions create a tremendous amount of delight, even more than giving the customer money and freebies. And the cheap delighters, where you simply have enthusiasm or empathy or create fun, are just as effective as the costly ones. And a good example of this is that we've identified 4 of these delighters. Transparent explanation, showed interest and concern, connected with you in a personal way, and were enthusiastic. And those create as much positive impact as giving somebody freebies, which are the 2 that have the dollar signs next to them. Now, the other one that was very surprising is if I cross-sell you something you can actually use, that creates delight. And you then say, I would definitely pay more for products from this company. So it's sort of a win-win-win, the customer, the company, and lots more revenue. Now, in terms of the context for self-service, ideally you want to do the job right. And this is where if you do the job right, you prevent the need for any contact. You proactively educate the customer. Step 2 is if they do have questions, you want to get them to go to self-service, give them easy access to self-service, and then, and only then, would they then go to the contact handling system to talk to one of your reps. So the idea is to ideally prevent the workload by educating the customer and being proactive, channel them correctly to self-service, and then the third step is the contact center. Now, our criticism of most organizations is that they are spending most of their resources responding to the individual customer rather than saying, why are we getting these calls? How can we prevent them? And how can we get people to self-serve? So, self-service, what is it and what is it not? Self-service is preventing the need to call by proactively answering questions, providing easy access to basic transactions and questions 7 by 24, and reducing customer effort by getting them easily to the answer via the desired channel. Service is it's not a technology play. The hardest part, as Matt's going to talk about, is inventorying and assessing your workload. It is not a solution to handle complex issues. You can create more dissatisfaction by badly handling a complex issue. One size does not fit all. You have different kinds of customers. At Apple, we would ask, are you technical or are you non-technical? Because we had 2 totally different ways of educating you depending on who you were. And then finally, it's not a one-time fix. The real challenge is that you need significant resources on an ongoing basis for maintenance and update. So this isn't a one-time activity. Now, to assess the self-service opportunity, the first thing you need to do is evaluate your workload and channels and say what percentage of this is preventable or easily self-service. And we normally find that somewhere in the range of 20 to 30%. This is what I call the dumb questions and trivia that everybody has, including password resets, et cetera, et cetera. And your alternatives are proactive education, onboarding, or just-in-time communication, website search, and we find that very few organizations really look at the outcome of their website search in terms of every failure of a search is then going to turn into a telephone call. So if you simply looked at what are people searching for that they're not finding, that gives you a good guide to where you need to enhance your website. The mobile app is another. To the degree that people adopt the mobile app, they're going to be able to self-service very easily. And what we find in most organizations is you're lucky if you get 20% adoption. An interesting goal is DraftKings, the online betting organization, that has 80% adoption. And we've also seen a credit union in Nevada that has 90% adoption. And this is because they're really, really effective at onboarding the customer. You can also have AI-enabled chatbots, SMS, online communities can divert a fair amount, and then sort of at the bottom of the list is telephone and voice. But what we're finding is in a number of our clients is that the amount of voice traffic is going down very significantly. So you're facing a chicken or egg issue here. Are people calling because they want to call, or are they calling because they can't self-service? We find that in most cases, the answer is the latter. So what is a reasonable target? I would argue that somewhere in the range of 15 to 20% is probably a good target to start with, but then I would invoke my DraftKings example of 80% or even higher. So the other challenge you need to think about is that if you have the customer self-service, you're missing the opportunity to create a strong emotional connection. There is a book out there by somebody from Amazon that is entitled The Best Service is No Service. We're not so sure about that, because if you don't give any interaction with the customer, you can't dazzle them and delight them. So you really need to sort of do the cost benefit. Now, to pilot test, we suggest you do this before you go for a full-blown initiative to really show management that there's a payoff here. Select 2 questions for prevention and 3 issues for self-service. Identify the channels for delivery of that information that's going to work best. And by the way, you probably want to have multiple channels. Develop access processes. And there, it's indexing all the different issues on the website and the FAQs, and also using your AI-driven chatbot. And again, Matt's going to be talking about the joys of that activity. You then test with an A/B test as to, does this new approach work better than the other one? And you do 100% follow-up using email surveys, very short email surveys, so you can ascertain not only who's using what, but how happy are they in doing it. Then you assess what worked and what didn't, and the impact on phone volumes, and then demonstrate the increased satisfaction and decrease in phone volume. So again, this is just a straight standard DMAIC quality kind of an experiment. Now, I'd mentioned onboarding. We basically find that onboarding will eliminate the need for service in a tremendous number of cases, and we have 6 steps, and the first 2 steps very few companies ever even think about. The first is flagging who needs to be onboarded and what is their persona. For instance, are they technical or non-technical, or in an AARP environment, do they love to travel? Are they politically active? Are they concerned about healthcare? Secondly, you need to motivate them to get educated. And we find that the motivation is you can scare them, you can bribe them, you can challenge them with gamification. One example of the bribe is there's a credit union that says, if you watch this 4-minute video, we will give you a 1/4 point off your mortgage rate. And they have found it's worth the money because those people who've watched the video are dramatically easier to do business with. Then you provide the basic education via multiple channels, speech, video, graphics, and again, reinforcing in multiple channels is important. Then you take them to self-service. You show them, here's how you get to self-service. And at Hewlett-Packard a while back, they found that if somebody said, here, let me show you where you could have answered this on self-service, and they spend 2 minutes doing that, what they found was every 2 minutes spent educating people on the website saved 10 minutes of subsequent phone calls. You want to provide advanced education on advanced features after the person has demonstrated that they understand the basics. And then again, another step that very few people do is evaluating, did the onboarding process work and what was its impact? And in the resource section, we actually have a paper that goes through this in a lot of detail. Now, the last thing I'll leave you with before I turn it over to Matt is, what's the impact of good onboarding and proactive education and providing people with information? This is actual data from a major internet service provider. And we basically identified which people were happy and comfortable with the education they had at the beginning versus those who weren't. And then we looked at, depending on how happy they were, what's the difference in their perception in value for price paid, minimal outages, speed of download, clarity of bills. And what you see in every single case is you have 40% higher satisfaction if the customer felt that they were well educated. And so the thought here is, don't fix your product, fix the customer. Educate the customer. And what we've also found is that channels that aggressively educate the customer have 30% less problems. So this is an example of, you can dramatically improve your product performance without changing your product at all if you just better communicate with your customer. And with that, let me pass it over to Matt.
Hey, thank you, John, and hello, everybody. All the strategic tactics and that John just went over, we at AARP completely used with our journey that we're taking into self-service as we built out our channels, and that we continue to take. It's an ongoing journey as you're learning. But what I'm going to do is go over some of the planning that we took, the prioritizations, how we analyzed things, and what we've learned so far as we've gone out into and provided self-service for our members. One of the things John really touched on was being able to identify your workload and how you want to figure out what types of interactions you want to assign to be self-service. At AARP, our main model is that subscription service. Our 38 million members that we cater to, over 50, they produce a lot of volume, mainly about questions around their account. So those are our highest demand drivers. So the first things you want to look at, what basic transactions could self-service cater to? For us, it was people trying to sign up for AARP, renewing, password changes were a big piece of that. So changing their password on our website, anything dealing with account maintenance, basic things like changing your address so they could get the AARP magazine, or adding people to the accounts. Scheduling appointments. We have a lot of local events all across the nation, and we help people schedule for those. And then people come to us around questions around service. We have hundreds of different types of services that we offer, as well as discounts. So just basic questions around that, or questions around our advocacy efforts and what we stand for at AARP. Those are ones that you could really put help articles out, help chatbots could easily answer those. The next level would be those where you might have follow-on questions. These could be status of the orders as we're sending out their membership cards, anything around how they're being charged, are they getting double charged, and pricing attributes. So anywhere where you have to go beyond one answer, you'll have to think about how you want to maybe handle that. Could be better handled through an agent. And then the most complex is when you start to get into troubleshooting. And this is more for if it's more of a technical type problem that someone's run into. So it's an exception they've run into during their experience where they need help. Sometimes self-service can be there, and like a chatbot could help step in, but more than likely, a lot of times agents have to help them with these specific types of interactions. And then some you can also hand off if you have an online community to the folks in the community who know the product pretty well and can help all of the newbies getting up to speed. So there's a peer-to-peer question and answer scenario going on there. When you're planning, what we did was we put all of our channels and centralized them under our help site, which we call the help network. We do offer our landing page on the help site, which includes lots of help articles that come out of our knowledge base, our online chat. We answer people in all of our social media channels. We have SMS. You could text us for help. People searching on our sites, getting search results there. Of course, we offer our phone and links to the help area of our online community. So there's many different channels and you want to meet people in the channels that they like using, so they don't have to channel switch. We then agreed on criteria for, again, what was spoken about in the last slide, what's appropriate for self-service. Agree on within the knowledge base how you're going to approach the curation of the answers. So since this is the same knowledge base our agents are using, which articles are you going to release out into the public so they can be consumed, and how are those going to be written? But those are all one object. So you don't have a separate set of FAQs that you have to maintain somewhere out on your website, plus the articles you're offering here. Keep it as one source so that it's consistent and can be updated easily. Again, if you have a mobile app, try to embed as many of these functions into the app as you can, so people can find their answers easily. And then you want to constantly be looking for new tools as they emerge and new features within these tools for the response and the management of self-service, any new AI features that might come out in the chatbot that you can explore. We turned on additional social media monitoring, so we're constantly scanning all our social channels for new types of questions that people might be answering. And so we can jump into those conversations and have a seat at the table when they're talking about our brand. And then integrating SMS and text is always something that's good and fun to continue to explore, but you really have to partner with your marketing teams who may be having text campaigns so that there could be an easy handoff into the service realm. When people are searching for answers on your help site, it's always good to have a drop-down list. This is the kind of, you experience this on some help sites when you start typing, and especially on Google when you're typing a query, the drop-down list kind of guesses what you're looking for. A lot of search engines that have good AI will offer that. And then our help site, we basically set it up as a kind of basically a virtual concierge desk. So as we are provisioning new members, they can quickly go there and get fast answers to get them back on track. If you look at our help page, this is help.aarp.org. Kind of the elements that make up this page is, first of all, you want to keep it simple and not overload it with information, but we do have the drop down here for when you're typing your queries. We do have a featured articles section, and this is where you would feature all of your top high demand driver questions, as well as topics that you may want to feature based on specific campaigns that might be happening or a new release of a product that came out. And then we have these tiles, which are, people can browse into these and where they see the collections of help articles. These are usually collections of the top transactions that people are looking to do. We also have a collection of help videos. This is really good for tutorials to teach people how to do things on their site, like taking care of their account and where to do that. So the visual element is really powerful. And then, of course, this is our channel strip. So we point everybody here as the starting point for help and support, so they can pick the way they want to interact with us. When you're looking at what types of issues you want to have indexed in your search engine, you want to think about specific types of criteria. So first of all, as I said before, what is your top demand? So how often are these occurring? We want to be able to keep them simple as possible. So if it's a very lengthy troubleshooting document, that may not be the best versus something that you can give them a single answer. And then, as John mentioned, keeping it at a low probability of emotional connection or cross-selling, which you more likely would want to have an agent tackle. You're always looking to identify the full range of keywords that are associated with the issue coming in. So how many ways can somebody ask a certain question, right? So you want to work with any kind of SEO strategy that your marketing team's leveraging, so that people can easily find those help articles. And then once you have that down, you want to continue to analyze those search verbatims so you can identify content gaps in your knowledge base. How people are wording and phrasing their questions, so that you can make the articles as easily to find as possible. But it also helps if you have a chat bot, it helps to fine tune the conversations so that it's talking in ways that your customers are. And then you also want to take into account how do you transfer from that unassisted service realm to the assisted realm, and make sure that's clean. So if you have a chat bot front ending your chat, you're moving something like a log of the chat to the agent, so the agent isn't then asking them the same question that they posed to the chat bot. So you want to make that experience as effortless as possible during the handoff. Some of the things that you really want to think about is, well, first of all, before we even get a service issue coming in, it'd be nice to prevent that in the first place. So what can you do upstream to kind of head those off the pass? It starts with marketing, making sure that your marketing messages are clear, they're effective, that you have a close relationship with marketing as you're onboarding your members, so that those top questions are pretty much pre-fielded during the onboarding process, and make sure that that's tailored to the personas as much as possible. So at AARP, we're working on onboarding something for caregivers versus someone who's more interested in our discount. So those questions are taken care of up front. Once you have that nailed down, then you continue to evaluate that impact across all of the different channels that people come to you to interact with by the issue, because you will find that people go to certain channels for certain issues. We quickly found that social media was our top channel for advocacy questions versus chat, which was more around account management. So you'll find that those will bubble up, and then you can leverage and hone those features in that channel to cater to those specific types of issues. As John mentioned, you want to really get into measuring delight as well as satisfaction and dissatisfaction. And that's really what causes that, and what actions in the messaging really cause that delight for your members. For us, we found that when our agents started using emoticons to express delight or frustration, that really resonated with a lot of our members in chat. Same thing with our caregivers. We really worked on honing our tone of empathy and listening to the storytelling of our members as they talked about caring for their parents, and that really resonated with them. Continue to analyze the effectiveness of how you're transitioning those unassisted to assisted transactions, so you can optimize it on the unassisted side. And then one of the biggest things that is always ongoing, and you probably would want to dedicate somebody to this on a team, is just the ongoing adoption of your self-service channels. So where do you place all of the pointers pointing people to these self-service channels? Continue measuring the adoption of trends over that time. What elements are affecting volume, and how do you continue to grow that adoption? So you do have to align really tightly with marketing on that, and making sure that with any new campaigns, you are integrating and featuring that into the other interaction channels and campaigns. So impacts and lessons learned. The biggest impact, our help center is now catering to the previous unmet online demand. So if you don't have a dedicated help site, you'll find that when you put that out, there's already an unmet demand out there that you aren't meeting, and it'll immediately start to be met, and you can see that. But over a year now, we've now servicing 10 to 15% of all service demand. We saw a workload shift, about 8.5% drop in phone volume over the past year because of that, as we market it, and a decreased email workload for agents went by almost 80% plus. And one of the reasons of this too is because we were able to almost take away all of our email channel now that we're pointing everybody to our help site and self-service, which is picking up a lot of that now. So more lessons learned. Again, partner with marketing so you can clarify and simplify those marketing offers. Put those top issues on the help page and make sure that somebody is monitoring that so you can quickly keep those updated. Offer multiple channels so you can meet people on the channels of their choice, and really be careful with AI and chatbots. They're great, but don't overcommit to doing everything. They're good for specific things, but they do a great job at what they do. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John.
Okay, great. Just to summarize, you need to assess the status quo in terms of what are the workload opportunities, and again, keeping in mind prevention, onboarding, and self-service. Index all the issues, and one thing Matt didn't mention, but on the drop-down box, which is the top part of the homepage, they have hundreds of ways of asking the questions. I mean, for any particular issue, they offer at least 6 or 8 different approaches, so they've really thought it through in a lot of detail. Then do the experiment of identifying some things for prevention and self-service. Do your A/B pilot test. Evaluate the impact, and be prepared that some of the stuff isn't going to work. And that's perfectly fine. Probably 40 or 50% of the experiments should not work. If it's below that, you're probably not experimenting very aggressively. And then invest in technology as well as clarified marketing and onboarding. And when, this is my opinion, using AI, once you've had a failure, exit to a human being. Don't make them have 2 failures, because you're going to wind the customer up very, very fast. And in terms of this idea of experimentation, this is from Jeff Bezos's letter to shareholders in 2018. And on the second page of a 3-page letter, the header was "Failure needs to scale too." And he says, if the size of your failures isn't growing, you're not going to be investing at a size that's going to actually move the needle. And he then went on to say, we may have some billion-dollar failures. And he's giving people the mandate to experiment broadly, and that's what you need to be doing. So in terms of thinking about where self-service fits, ideally, you want to prevent problems and improve your processes, enhance problem handling with less effort, and that's where self-service comes in, and then once you've done that, aggressively solicit complaints to service the unarticulated issues. Everyone on this call has at least 30% of their customers who are unhappy or befuddled who have not reached out at all. And the way you get them to reach out to you is, we can only handle problems that we know about. Contact us. So with that, We're going to go to Mac, and then we will have questions and complaints, and also happy to offer a follow-up briefing to any of your teams in a complimentary manner. And then we've also got in the resource section several potential papers that may be of use to you. And with that, let me turn it over to Mac.
Thank you, John. I'm just going to spend a few moments here to talk to everyone about our view of the world from a service provider. And we have luxury, just as I'm sure John has done many, many times, and Matthew, as he's looked across different divisions at AARP, to understand as you begin this journey in transformation, you have to accept two things. And one, I really do want to repeat what John just said, to be comfortable in failing, that there is no one size that fits all. And we really have to be comfortable in the fact that each of us are unique in our business approach, our business practices, and our business demands. And so this process is really about finding that happy medium where you're able to balance the customer experience with cost constraints, time constraints, resource constraints, and other things. I want to spend just a moment, because I'm sure all of you probably are thinking, well, if I do this, how much does it cost and can I afford to pay? And I would encourage you to adopt the recommendations that John put on the table and looking at two questions or three challenges that you'd like to automate or move into a self-service realm, but also think about them in using my terminology, both a vertical and a horizontal approach. When I say vertical, I'm thinking there's a particular issue, and as you can see here on the diagram, you may make the decision that I want to automate order status. My databases are easy to get access to. I can read back those statuses in a succinct way to my customers, and they can give me an order number or some other identification, and I can give them the information that they need, and hopefully they can walk away happy. That may make a lot of sense in a lot of situations, but there are a lot of contingencies that are attached to that. Another way to look at working through that is to think horizontally. As you engage with your end users or your constituents, what are the repetitive tasks that could also be self-serve, where it may not be the entire end state goal, but we can do things such as ID or identification and validation of who they are, and take that mechanism off of the desk of a very expensive human resource and give it to what should be a much lower expensive intelligent or semi-intelligent resource, either through AI or through some scripting automation and some other things. Through some of this, I do encourage you to actually build out a business case so that you have targets, again, not just for the customer experience, but also for what impacts you expect it to have on your organization, so that you can free up the time to do, again, some of the things that John suggested, and investing in that extra 2 minutes of training, or making sure that customers understand that there are other methods of getting to their answers versus, again, the very expensive phone call. This is just a super simple chart, and I'm not going to bore you with the numbers, but it really is just taking an approach of reviewing your processes, finding out what you can automate, and then substituting out the agent time for, again, less expensive time, and coming up with some dollar assessment on what the value of that particular project is. Taking that time up front to build that business case will help you as a business leader, or help the business leaders understand the power and impact of these solutions, again, not just in an experience realm, but also in a financial realm to help move things forward. As you look across the spectrum of providers that are out there today, and also folks like John and his firm, and others that can assist you in this, you should prepare also a list of questions, things that you want to try and tackle and understand the capability of that individual provider, or perhaps that you need to assemble a team of different providers to meet the uniqueness of your particular situation. Some key things that I would suggest that are in the back of your mind, but that there's not a cut and dry It has to be the left or it has to be the right. But think about, is this approach going to take place across all of your channels, be it social, SMS, voice, web? Are you able to use AI technology in a thoughtful and meaningful way? And can you gain synergies by having the same artificial intelligence engine power the interactions across multiple channels? Can that provider help you co-create a solution? Oftentimes, I think as you look to go engage, it can be somewhat daunting because there's a lot of powerful tools that are out there, but there may not necessarily be the resources of people to help you use those tools. And can they provide you the coaches, the managed services, and the other elements that can help you get a solution into your environment quickly and succinctly, and then understand, is it working or is it not, and how to address any changes that come about. Can they help you build that business case? Do they have the experience in doing the cost analysis around your environment, looking at prem, looking at cloud, looking at hybrid, and how, again, different solutions can be brought to bear to solve something? And then perhaps most importantly, can they move at your pace? Some organizations may have an initiative that they need to transform immediately to meet new market demands or market pressures. Others will take a more methodical approach in looking at different areas and testing and validating and then moving to the next. And is that service provider able and willing to work with you at the pace that you want to move forward at? So with that, I think I'm going to hand it back over to Megan, and hopefully we can open it up to some questions and some answers from us here on the panel.
Great, thanks, Mac. So we have a few great questions in the Q&A system, but if you guys have any additional questions while we get started here, don't forget to toss them in the Q&A panel, and I will include them here until we get to the top of the hour. Luis has a great question to start, and it is, how far should you go with automated solutions or with self-service until the customer is enabled to or prompted to talk to a representative? What's the ideal threshold? Is there one?
Well, I think my opinion is that if you have one failure, I would at that point transition them quickly to a human being in most cases. I would be interested what the other two gentlemen thought.
Oh, go ahead, Mac.
I was going to say, I would agree with that there's nothing more frustrating to an end user to have even though you may use, live voice talent to create the interaction, but that the constant, I'm sorry, I didn't get that. Can you please repeat your account number? That's very frustrating. And you're really setting yourself up in that particular interaction to have someone that perhaps is at a neutral sentiment or probably even in a happy sentiment to go negative. Also, it creates distrust. The next time they call, they're more apt to say agent or representative or operator and try and bypass the technology that you put out there. So I think the depth of that interaction, I definitely agree with John, is as far as it can be successful in satisfying the customer. And again, if it's something like ticket status or order status or what are your store hours, those things are fairly common and can be automated quite easily. But as you get into more complex things where perhaps, it's not an order status, but a trouble ticket status, I would tend more toward, again, qualifying and appropriately skilling that interaction so you move them to the correct agent, but move them over to an agent as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I would also agree. I mean, for AARP, some of our members only talk to us once or twice a year. So you only have that opportunity to make a good impression. So with our chatbot, I believe when they if they were to ask a question and the chatbot doesn't know the answer, it automatically will say, I'm transferring you over to a chat agent. Now, ideally, that intent of that chatbot would know based on the question that someone's typing how to handle it and whether it can handle it.
One other thing I would add here is that's sort of a classic example of what not to do is a well-known drugstore chain who will go nameless had a refill system that worked perfectly. It was, Would you like a refill? Would you like to talk to the pharmacist? They had like 3 or 4 things. They then decided to get fancy, and they asked the question, what can I do for you? And all of a sudden, the completion rates plummeted, and you had a whole bunch of people getting really wound up. So keep it simple and don't try and get fancy.
No, I absolutely agree. I think another great example actually is the opposite of that. We have the pleasure of working with a major utility company, and their new customer intake process, they do ask the customer to tell them the address just to make sure that it's in their service footprint. And they could take them through a number of other questions to understand how to get their service going, but they made the conscious decision to simply confirm that they're in the footprint or not, and then immediately hand that person to an agent because they're a brand new customer, and they wanted one of their people to be able to engage personally with them as quickly as possible. So even though, again, the technology could do a whole lot, the persona that they wanted to project as a brand led them to a path where they wanted to, again, put a highly skilled agent in front of the customer as soon as possible.
Great. We have a few more sort of numbers and ratio questions. One, John, I think this is for you. This relates to the slides you presented at the beginning. Christina has a question about the minutes spent by the consumer on the site versus the phone. And specifically, did you say that 2 minutes spent by the consumer on the site saves 10 minutes on the phone, or that 2 minutes spent on website development eventually saves 10 minutes on calls?
Okay, the specific case was that if you call me up asking a dumb question that you could have self-service, I cheerfully answer your question. And then I say, by the way, ma'am, have you been to our website? If you got 2 minutes, let me take you to the website. I take you to the website. Okay, here's where you could have found that answer. And by the way, your next question is probably this, and here's where you would find that. What they found was that the 2-minute effort of the rep in educating the person, taking the person to the website and educating them, then saved subsequently 10 minutes of additional calls from that same customer. So basically, it was a quasi-controlled experiment where they had 500 customers that they did the education, and then 500 other customers where they didn't do the education, and then they looked at how many calls did they get from each of the 2 samples. And what they found was that if we spent the 2 minutes up front educating, we then didn't get a whole bunch of other calls because people self-service.
Got it. Thanks for the clarification. So this question is more around numbers around setup. So there's 2 and they're related. What's a reasonable target for starting out with self-service? Meaning, how much workload should you anticipate being able to shift to self-service when you're getting started?
I'll try and take that one. I think it really depends upon your environment. As some companies will attest, many things perhaps have come up organically in self-built systems and databases. Perhaps you have a number of disparate systems through acquisitions or mergers that have happened over time, and you've got a customer base that is still spread out across those systems. That environment may be very difficult to completely self-serve and automate. And whereas if you have a more monolithic type approach, everybody's in the same database, you have known workflows that are easily accessible. And so you really have to weigh the question about the flexibility of your environment to answer that question. As I think John threw some numbers out there, like with DraftKings. And DraftKings didn't exist 10 years ago. And so they had an opportunity to really look at a mobile app and push their users to it, and are seeing phenomenal rates of self-service, where perhaps a company that's been around for 100 years and has numerous systems that have to be able to talk to one another, or agents that are swivel chairing between those to serve them, would find that they really could only move 10 or 15% of those interactions into a self-service model. My personal experience has been just really, truly unique, and it depends upon the back office and where it actually is.
What I would suggest also is that you want to under-promise and over-deliver. So tell your boss that you're going to aim for 6%, and you should be so lucky to get 12 or 15%.
Generally a sound policy for life. Related, so you mentioned DraftKings performance and a few other companies that had really astonishing engagement with self-service. Is there a right ratio or an ideal ratio of chatbot ready questions that have fairly simple answers versus complex questions that beg more of a live agent response? Is there a target contact center should be shooting at?
Well, for AARP, I would say is about the simple ones are about 10 to 15% of our highest volume. Now you could take those and then divide those into ones where you might have ones that are easy to answer with a single answer versus multiple follow-up answers. So, but for us, it was the top 10 to 15%.
I think that it's also a function of your products. And again, Matt works on the nonprofit side of AARP, which is membership. They have, everything from travel to insurance on the other side. And the complexity is sort of what Mac was talking about. To the degree that you have complex products, you're going to be able to siphon off the simple stuff, but you've still got those really messy things. On the other hand, when we're working with Kraft Heinz, a lot of the most complex things you get into is food preparation and such, and it's nowhere near as complicated as a homeowner's insurance claim. So it really is going to vary by industry. And one of the big things now in food is, do you have these ingredients? And that could be self-service from a yes, no kind of a question.
Great. Patty has a question around channel proliferation. And I think this was related to your section of the presentation, Matt, where you were talking about the channels you guys offer self-service in. However, her question is, some research indicates that if one offers multiple channels, that customers will use all of them and they won't necessarily improve resolution or drive less workload in the contact center. Any thoughts on how channel expansion has improved your self-service offering specifically, Matt, and how it affects self-service generally, John and Mac?
Well, for us, it is more, I mean, you're right that some people do, and we do see some people will be on chat while they're holding the phone, while they're, sending us a text message to see what sticks. But at the same time, you do have audiences that specifically, like someone just likes to text, and that's how they communicate with not only the brands, but the people in their lives. And so for the most part, we don't see a lot of people using multiple channels at once. The majority is still people who are dedicated to a single channel. And also in the case of like social media, where we have a bot fronting Facebook Messenger in Facebook, you're actually catching people as they're going through their daily social media streams. So if we have a campaign running that just shows up in their daily routine of reading Facebook, and then that might trigger a question they might have for us. You're actually bringing people into a conversation that you might not have otherwise in a channel like that.
I'd agree that our experience is similar, where we don't see people really jumping channels, or and I don't know that I have any quantitative data on people that may initiate multiple channels simultaneously, again, to see where the response is faster. One thing that I would also suggest is that you can look at somewhat of a hybrid approach. I would not generally recommend that if somebody calls you, that you tell them, hey, can I move this over to web or to SMS? But certainly if you have somebody on a voice call and you want to, as best as you can, foster a single call resolution, because a package is going to take the entire week to move across the country, you may want to send them a link via SMS so that they can just go self-serve and move them out of the channel they're in into another channel for future interactions. And it could be, a link to the FAQs, it could be a status link, other things, and again, leverage another channel to sort of augment the communication that you have in front of you in the moment.
We found that you can, to a degree, influence the channels that people will use, I don't totally agree with this philosophy, but some people will, like on Matt's help page, the 800 number would be at sort of the bottom of the list. It would be the last one. And I know TELUS, the Canadian phone company, does it that way. And they have quite high levels of satisfaction, but it's also because some of their other channels are very, very responsive. We also find that by offering all those different channels, you actually tap into new groups of people that wouldn't normally be even communicating with you. And one that came out of the Delight study that I'm still trying to understand a bit is even in areas of fashion and health and beauty, we are finding that on a per Delight occurrence basis, men are posting on social 20 to 25% more than women, which goes against a whole bunch of stereotypes, which just may be wrong. But we were really surprised, but the numbers the N sizes are big enough that this is absolutely real. This is affluent customers, and it may be that men have not been delighted that much in a lot of situations, and now all of a sudden they're actually posting about it. But there have been some interesting things. We're also finding that, for instance, Intel and Cisco make heavy use of their online communities, as does Intuit. And they really can get 20, 30% of their total service workload serviced by the community as opposed to by representatives. And in some ways, it's even more credible if it's coming from the community. So it's sort of, I think you can shift the workload by how you push or present the different channels. But the ones that are working best and are most comfortable for the customers are going to be the ones that get used the most. And I would build on that success.
Great. Thanks, everyone. We're getting down to our last question here, and it's vertical specific. Victoria asks, is self-service successful in a healthcare environment? Can it be successful, and how?
I'll take, I guess, a first swing at that one from a practical experience. Absolutely. If there's any positive that perhaps has come out of the global COVID-19 pandemic, is that I think we've all learned that different and new environments can still be successful in fulfilling the needs, not just of employees, but also of customers and constituents. We had the arduous task of helping to set up a self-service, really a self-registration for COVID-19 vaccines, where football stadiums were turned into vaccine sites overnight, and tens of thousands of people needed to be able to schedule an appointment such that we could, meter the demand out over the course of the day and not create traffic jams everywhere. Just one example. I think a number of healthcare providers are looking at, reminders that then lead into other engagements with their customers, so that they can, find out information, schedule an appointment, and do, some basic tasks that otherwise would have involved a live call into the office. And many service providers like ourselves have gone through the extra steps, not only to be PCI compliant in the credit card space, but also to be HIPAA compliant, so that personal protected information is held safe as they engage with the system. So I would say absolutely it can be successfully used in healthcare.
I would agree that I think an awful lot of the upfront paperwork and scheduling and a whole bunch of that stuff now is I think, for better for worse, the population has been trained that can be done on a automated self-service basis, and people are reasonably comfortable with it now.
Fantastic. Well, we are reaching the top of the hour, and that's all we have time for today. Thank you to everyone in the audience who joined us and participated in today's event. I'd also like to thank John, Matt, and Mac for presenting, and thank you again to IntelliPeer for sponsoring today's event. As a reminder, the slides for today's session are available in the resources list, and you'll receive a follow-up email that will include a link to view a recording of today's presentation. So if you found this event useful, please do share it with your colleagues. Once you leave the event, a short survey will pop up in your browser window. We'd appreciate it if you'd share your feedback on this webinar, as it helps us tailor our programs to your interests. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I hope you'll join us again next month for another great session.